Emma Rodriguez walked through the crowded hallway of Lincoln High School, her worn backpack slung over one shoulder. The faded black bag had seen better days, with loose threads hanging from the zippers and a small tear near the bottom that she'd patched with duct tape. Most students wouldn't give such an ordinary backpack a second glance, but Emma treasured it more than any designer bag her classmates carried. The morning bell hadn't rung yet, and clusters of students gathered around lockers, chattering about weekend plans and upcoming tests. Emma kept her head down, navigating through the social maze with practiced ease. She'd learned long ago that staying invisible was often the safest strategy in high school's unforgiving ecosystem. "Hey, Rodriguez, wait up!" a voice called from behind her. Emma's stomach dropped. She recognized that voice immediately. Marcus Webb, the school's most notorious bully, had spotted her. Marcus stood 6 feet tall with broad shoulders that he'd built up from years of playing football. His reputation for intimidating smaller students was well known throughout the school, and teachers seemed to turn a blind eye to his behavior as long as he kept bringing wins to the football team. Emma quickened her pace, hoping to reach her first period classroom before Marcus caught up with her. She could hear his heavy footsteps getting closer, along with the snickers of his usual crew of followers. Jake Peterson and Danny Collins flanked Marcus on either side, both eager to watch whatever entertainment their leader had planned. "I said wait up, Rodriguez!" Marcus's voice was louder now, carrying an edge of annoyance that made other students in the hallway glance over nervously. Emma's heart hammered in her chest as she realized she wasn't going to make it to her classroom in time. She stopped walking and slowly turned around, keeping her eyes focused on the scuffed linoleum floor. Years of experience had taught her that making eye contact with Marcus only made things worse. "There we go," Marcus said with a smirk, his voice dripping with false friendliness. Now that wasn't so hard, was it? The small crowd that had gathered to watch kept a safe distance, some students pulling out their phones to record what might happen next. Emma noticed how quickly the hallway had gone quiet, conversations dying as people realized Marcus had found his next target. "What do you want, Marcus?" Emma asked quietly, still not looking up. "What do I want?" Marcus laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the metal lockers. "I want to know what makes little Emma Rodriguez think she's too good to talk to me when I call her name." Emma felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She could feel dozens of eyes watching her, waiting to see how this confrontation would unfold. Some students looked sympathetic, but none of them would step in to help. Everyone knew that crossing Marcus Webb meant becoming his next target. "I didn't hear you," Emma lied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Didn't hear me?" Marcus stepped closer, invading her personal space. "That's funny, because I know you heard me just fine. You were trying to run away, weren't you?" Jake and Danny chuckled behind him, feeding off their leader's energy. They formed a loose semicircle around Emma, cutting off any potential escape routes. Emma felt trapped, like a mouse cornered by a pack of hungry cats. "I wasn't running," Emma said, finally lifting her eyes to meet Marcus's gaze. "I just have to get to class." "Oh, you have to get to class," Marcus mocked, his voice taking on a high-pitched tone meant to imitate hers. "Well, isn't that responsible of you? Such a good little student." Emma's hands tightened around the straps of her backpack. The familiar weight of it against her back provided some small comfort, reminding her of the person who had given it to her. She drew strength from that memory, standing a little straighter despite the fear coursing through her veins. Marcus noticed the defiant lift of her chin, and his expression darkened. He didn't like it when his victims showed any sign of backbone. It made the game less fun, and Marcus Webb lived for the fear he could instill in others. "You know what I think, Rodriguez?" Marcus said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "I think you need to learn some manners. I think you need to understand that when I call your name, you stop and pay attention." Emma's mouth went dry. She could see the cruel gleam in Marcus's eyes, The same look he got right before he pushed some poor freshman into a locker or knocked books out of someone's hands. She braced herself for whatever humiliation he had planned. "Turn around," Marcus commanded. "What?" Emma asked, confused by the unexpected order. "You heard me. Turn around. Let's see what's so important in that ugly backpack of yours that you had to rush off to class." Emma's blood turned to ice. "No," she said firmly, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. The word hung in the air between them like a challenge. Marcus's eyebrows shot up in genuine surprise. Students rarely said no to him directly, especially not quietly spoken girls like Emma Rodriguez. The hallway seemed to hold its collective breath. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Did you just tell me no?" Emma's heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it, but she didn't back down. "I said no. You can't go through my backpack. It's my property." Marcus's face flushed red with anger. Being defied in front of an audience was the ultimate insult to his carefully cultivated reputation. He couldn't let this slide, not if he wanted to maintain his position as the school's top intimidator. "We'll see about that," Marcus snarled. Before Emma could react, Marcus lunged forward and grabbed the backpack, trying to yank it off her shoulders. Emma held on tight, her fingers digging into the worn fabric straps. The sudden tug of war sent them both stumbling, and Emma felt the backpack's contents shifting inside. "Let go," Marcus demanded, pulling harder. "No!" Emma shot back, her voice rising in panic. The crowd of onlookers pressed closer, sensing that this confrontation was escalating beyond Marcus's usual verbal intimidation. Some students looked uncomfortable, while others seemed excited by the prospect of a real fight. A few pulled out their phones to record the incident. Marcus was stronger than Emma, and he used his size advantage to overpower her grip on the backpack. With one final violent tug, the bag came free from Emma's shoulders. The force of his pull sent Emma stumbling backward into the lockers, her shoulder blades hitting the metal with a painful clang. "There we go," Marcus said triumphantly, holding the backpack above his head like a trophy. "Now let's see what Rodriguez has been hiding." Emma scrambled to her feet, reaching desperately for her backpack. "Give it back! You have no right!" But Marcus held it out of her reach, grinning as he watched her jump futilely to grab it. His cronies laughed at the pathetic display, encouraging their leader with jeers and taunts. "What's the matter, Rodriguez?" Marcus taunted. "Afraid I might find something embarrassing? Maybe some love letters to that weird kid from chemistry class?" Emma felt tears of frustration burning in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of all these people. She wouldn't give Marcus the satisfaction of seeing her break down completely. Marcus unzipped the main compartment of the backpack with theatrical flair, making a show of his invasion of Emma's privacy. "Let's see what we have here," he said, reaching inside. Marcus's hand froze inside Emma's backpack as his fingers brushed against something unexpected. The smug grin on his face faltered as he pulled out a small, worn photograph. In the picture, a young Emma stood next to a man in military dress blues, both of them smiling broadly at the camera. But it wasn't the photo that made Marcus's blood run cold. Sewn into the inner lining of the backpack, clearly visible now that the main compartment was open, was a military patch. The golden trident, crossed flintlock pistol and rifle, and anchor were unmistakable. It was a Navy SEAL team patch, and beneath it, embroidered in faded gold thread, were the words SEAL Team 6 and a name, SGT Rodriguez. The hallway fell silent as students craned their necks to see what had caused such a dramatic shift in Marcus's demeanor. The cocky bully who had been terrorizing Emma just moments before now stood frozen, staring at the patch with wide eyes. His face had gone pale beneath his usual tan. Emma saw the recognition in Marcus's eyes and felt a surge of protective anger. "Put it down," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the emotional storm brewing inside her. but Marcus couldn't seem to move. His mind was racing as pieces of information clicked into place. Everyone in town knew about Sergeant Miguel Rodriguez. 3 years ago, the local hero had made national news when he'd sacrificed his life to save his fellow SEALs during a classified mission overseas. The entire community had turned out for his funeral, including Marcus's own family. "Your brother," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. Emma stepped forward, her earlier fear replaced by fierce protectiveness of her brother's memory. "Give me my backpack, Marcus. Now." The crowd of students began to murmur as word spread about what Marcus had discovered. Some of them remembered the funeral, the flag-draped coffin, the grieving family. Emma Rodriguez wasn't just some quiet girl they could ignore anymore. She was the sister of a war hero, and that changed everything. Marcus's hands trembled slightly as he looked between the photograph and the patch. In the picture, Miguel Rodriguez looked exactly like the man Marcus remembered from the news reports. The same kind eyes, the same gentle smile that had made him beloved in their small community. And here was Marcus, bullying his little sister, desecrating the memory of a man who had died serving his country. "I didn't know," Marcus said weakly, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew they sounded hollow and pathetic. Emma's eyes blazed with anger. "You didn't know because you never bothered to know. You saw someone you thought was weak, someone you could push around, and you never once wondered who I was or what I'd been through." The truth of her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. For all his size and strength, for all his reputation as someone not to be messed with, he felt smaller than he ever had in his life. He was holding the backpack of a girl whose brother had died fighting for their freedom, and he'd been treating her like garbage. Jake and Danny, sensing the shift in the situation, began to back away slowly. They wanted no part of whatever was happening here. The other students in the hallway watched in stunned silence as their school's biggest bully stood speechless, still clutching Emma's backpack. Emma held out her hand. "Give it back." Marcus looked down at the backpack in his hands, then back at Emma's face. For the first time, he really saw her, not as a target or a victim, but as a person with her own story, her own pain. The dark circles under her eyes spoke of sleepless nights. The way she carried herself, always alert and careful, suddenly made sense. She'd been through hell, and instead of offering support, people like Marcus had made her life even harder. "Emma, Marcus started, then stopped. What could he possibly say? What words could make up for the months of fear and humiliation he'd put her through? Emma stepped closer, her hand still extended. "I said, give it back." Marcus slowly, carefully, placed the backpack in her hands. As he did, he caught sight of other items inside. Textbooks with neat notes in the margins. A small notebook filled with what looked like poetry. A letter from the military, probably containing information about her brother's posthumous commendations. These were the treasured possessions of someone trying to hold her life together in the face of unimaginable grief. "Your brother," Marcus said again, his voice hoarse. "He was a hero." Emma clutched the backpack to her chest protectively. "Yes, he was. Miguel was the best person I've ever known. He was kind and brave, and he always stood up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. Everything you're not." The words cut deep, but Marcus knew he deserved every syllable. He thought about all the times he'd seen Emma in the hallways, all the opportunities he'd had to be decent to her. Instead, he'd chosen to be part of her pain. "Emma, please," Marcus said, and for the first time in years, his voice carried genuine humility. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Emma studied his face, looking for any sign that this was just another game, another way to humiliate her. But what she saw in Marcus's eyes was something she'd never seen there before, genuine remorse and shame. "Sorry doesn't fix anything. Emma said coldly. Sorry doesn't bring back my brother. Sorry doesn't undo all the times you've made me afraid to come to school. Marcus felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, a sensation so unfamiliar it startled him. You're right. I can't fix what I've done. But maybe I can do better. Emma shook her head. You should have done better from the beginning. You should have been better because it was the right thing to do, not because you found out my brother was a war hero. The bell rang, signaling the start of first period, but nobody moved. The hallway drama had captivated everyone present. Marcus looked around at the faces watching him, and for the first time, he saw the fear in their eyes differently. These weren't admiring looks from people who respected his strength. These were the terrified expressions of victims waiting for their turn. Emma started to walk away, but then paused. She turned back to face Marcus, her expression softer but still guarded. Miguel always said that the measure of a person isn't in their mistakes, but in what they do after they realize they've been wrong. He believed people could change. With that, she walked away, leaving Marcus standing alone in the emptying hallway. The other students dispersed quickly, eager to escape the awkward tension that lingered in the air. Some whispered among themselves about what they'd witnessed, while others simply hurried to their classrooms. Marcus remained motionless for several long minutes. Miguel Rodriguez's words echoing in his mind through his sister's voice. The measure of a person isn't in their mistakes, but in what they do after they realize they've been wrong. He thought about the man in the photograph, the hero who'd given his life for others, and tried to imagine what Miguel would think of how his sister was being treated at school. Jake and Danny had long since disappeared, probably worried about guilt by association. Marcus didn't blame them. He was beginning to understand that his reputation wasn't something to be proud of. It was built on fear and intimidation, on making others feel small so he could feel big. And now he had to face the fact that he'd been targeting the sister of a genuine American hero. The next few weeks at Lincoln High School were unlike anything anyone had experienced before. Word had spread quickly about Marcus's confrontation with Emma and the discovery of her brother's seal patch. The story grew and changed as it passed from student to student, but the core truth remained the same. The school's biggest bully had picked on a war hero's sister. Marcus found himself in an unfamiliar position. Students who had once laughed at his cruel jokes now looked at him with disgust. Teachers who had overlooked his behavior because of his football prowess suddenly seemed to notice every infraction. Even his former followers, Jake and Danny, had distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with someone who had targeted a Gold Star family. But the most difficult part for Marcus wasn't the social isolation, it was the weight of his own conscience. Every time he saw Emma in the hallways, carefully navigating around clusters of students, he was reminded of his role in making her school experience miserable. She never looked at him anymore, never acknowledged his presence, and somehow that hurt more than any confrontation would have. Emma, meanwhile, found herself dealing with an unexpected change in her social status. Students who had never spoken to her before now approached her with awkward attempts at conversation. Some genuinely wanted to express their respect for her brother's sacrifice, while others seemed motivated by morbid curiosity about what it was like to lose a sibling in combat. Emma appreciated the kind intentions, but felt overwhelmed by the sudden attention. One afternoon, as Emma sat alone in the library working on homework, Marcus approached her table. She looked up, surprised and wary. Since their confrontation 3 weeks earlier, he had maintained his distance, seemingly respecting her space. "Can I sit down?" Marcus asked quietly. Emma studied his face for a moment before nodding toward the empty chair across from her. "It's a free country. My brother died making sure it stayed that way." Marcus winced at the reference but sat down anyway. He had a manila folder in his hands, and he seemed nervous about whatever he wanted to say. "I've been doing some research," Marcus began, his voice barely above a whisper in the quiet library. "About your brother. About what he did overseas." Emma's expression hardened. "If you think learning about Miguel's military record is going to somehow make up for how you've treated me, you're wrong." "That's not why I did it," Marcus said quickly. "I mean, that's not the only reason. I wanted to understand. I wanted to know who he was, not just what he did." Marcus opened the folder and carefully pulled out several printed pages. Emma could see they were news articles, military commendations, and what looked like personal testimonials from Miguel's fellow service members. "Did you know," Marcus said softly, "that your brother saved 14 people the night he died? Not just his immediate team, but a whole group of civilians who were trapped in a compound." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "Yes, I know. The military told us everything after. One of his teammates wrote about him," Marcus continued, sliding one of the articles toward Emma. "He said Miguel always talked about his little sister back home, said you were the smartest, bravest person he knew, and that he was fighting to make the world safer for you." Emma looked down at the article, recognizing the name of one of Miguel's closest friends in his unit. She had met him at the funeral, but the day had been such a blur of grief that she barely remembered their conversation. "Why are you telling me this?" Emma asked. Marcus took a deep breath. "Because I realized that while your brother was overseas protecting people like me, I was here making your life hell. He was being everything a man should be, and I was being everything a man shouldn't be." Emma remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "I can't bring back your brother," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I can't undo the months of fear I put you through, but I can try to be the kind of person he would have approved of. The kind of person who protects people instead of hurting them." Emma looked at Marcus carefully. The arrogant bully who had tormented her seemed like a different person from the young man sitting across from her now. His shoulders were slumped with the weight of genuine remorse, and she could see that he'd been losing sleep over this. "What exactly are you proposing?" Emma asked. Marcus pulled out another paper from his folder. "I've been accepted into a program that helps veterans' families. It's run by the VFW, and they need volunteers to help with everything from yard work to tutoring kids who've lost parents in service." Emma raised an eyebrow. "You want to volunteer?" "I want to do something that matters," Marcus said. "I want to honor your brother's memory by helping people instead of hurting them. And I was hoping maybe you could tell me if that's something Miguel would have approved of." For the first time since their confrontation, Emma saw something in Marcus that reminded her of her brother. Miguel had always believed in second chances, in the power of people to change and grow. He'd often said that the best apology was changed behavior. "Miguel always said that everyone deserves a chance to be better than they were yesterday," Emma said slowly. "But he also said that actions matter more than words." Marcus nodded eagerly. "I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, or maybe ever. I just want you to know that I'm going to spend every day trying to be worthy of your brother's sacrifice." Emma closed her textbook and looked directly at Marcus. "My brother's sacrifice isn't something you can be worthy of. What he did was bigger than any of us. But you can honor it by becoming the kind of person who makes the world a little bit safer for people like me." Over the following months, Marcus threw himself into volunteer work with a dedication that surprised everyone who knew him. He helped elderly veterans with grocery shopping and yard work. He tutored children who had lost parents in military service. He organized fundraisers for wounded warrior programs. Most importantly, he became a different person at school. Gone were the days of intimidating smaller students or making cruel jokes at others' expense. When Marcus saw someone being bullied, he intervened. When he witnessed unfairness, he spoke up. He used his size and social position to protect others instead of preying on them. Emma watched these changes from a distance, cautious but hopeful. She had been hurt too deeply to trust easily, but she couldn't ignore the evidence of Marcus's transformation. Other students began to notice, too. The hallways felt safer. The social atmosphere became less toxic. One day, almost 6 months after the backpack incident, Emma found a letter in her locker. It was from Marcus, but it wasn't addressed to her. Instead, it was addressed to Sergeant Miguel Rodriguez, and it was clear that Marcus never intended for anyone else to read it. In the letter, Marcus wrote about his shame and regret. He told Miguel about the volunteer work he was doing and the changes he was trying to make. He promised to spend the rest of his life being the kind of man who protected people like Emma instead of hurting them. He asked for forgiveness he knew he could never receive from a man who was gone. Emma read the letter twice, tears streaming down her face. It wasn't the words themselves that moved her, but the raw honesty behind them. This wasn't a performance for her benefit. This was a broken young man trying to find a way to live with his mistakes. That afternoon, Emma found Marcus in the school's community service office, sorting donations for homeless veterans. She knocked on the door frame, and he looked up in surprise. "I read your letter," Emma said simply. Marcus's face went red. "I'm sorry. I don't know how that ended up in your locker. I would never have wanted you to—" "Miguel would be proud," Emma interrupted. Marcus stopped talking, his eyes wide with surprise. "Not of what you did before," Emma clarified, "but of who you're becoming. Miguel always said that heroes aren't people who never make mistakes. Heroes are people who do the right thing even when it's hard, especially after they've done the wrong thing." Marcus felt tears well up in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. Emma stepped into the office and picked up a box of donations. "My brother also said that the best way to honor a hero is to become one yourself, not through grand gestures or dramatic moments, but through daily choices to be better." As they worked side by side, sorting clothes and supplies for veterans in need, Emma realized that forgiveness didn't have to be a single moment of absolution. It could be a gradual process of rebuilding trust through consistent actions. Marcus had a long way to go to fully redeem himself, but he was walking the right path. The backpack incident had changed both of their lives in ways they never could have imagined. For Emma, it had taught her that strength didn't always come from staying silent and invisible. Sometimes strength meant standing up for yourself and holding others accountable for their actions. For Marcus, it had been a brutal awakening to the reality of his own behavior and its impact on others. As the school year drew to a close, Emma made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She nominated Marcus for the school's Community Service Award. When people asked her why, she gave them the same answer her brother might have given. "Because the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies," Emma explained. "It's turning them into allies in the fight for something better." Marcus never forgot the lesson learned from grabbing the wrong girl's backpack. Years later, as he pursued a career in social work, he would tell the story to troubled young people he counseled. He would explain how a single moment of cruelty had led to a lifetime of trying to make amends, and how sometimes the worst mistakes could become the catalyst for becoming your best self. Emma kept her brother's seal patch in her backpack throughout the rest of high school and into college. It served as a reminder not just of Miguel's sacrifice, but of the power of redemption and the importance of giving people the chance to change. Miguel had died protecting others, and in a way his memory had helped transform his former tormentor into a protector as well. The wrong girl's backpack had indeed made Marcus stop cold that day in the hallway. But more than that, it had started both Emma and Marcus on a journey toward healing, forgiveness, and becoming the people they were meant to be.